Hi and welcome to the Plughead.net review of the TT eSports THERON laser gaming mouse. And I suppose the first thing to say is this is actually quite a spectacular mouse. In lots of ways it's probably one of the best mice we've ever reviewed on Plughead.net. Having said that, it's not a mouse for everyone, and if you want to find out why, just keep watching the video. We've taken our usual in-depth look at this, so the video splits into several sections. To start off, we'll be looking at the features of the mouse, and there are plenty to talk about. And then we'll talk about the ergonomics. This is where things get a little bit more complicated. It really is quite an uncompromising mouse design. Probably won't suit everybody, but if it does suit you, all well and good. Then we'll go on to performance, talk about the driver a little bit, how it actually works in games, and then some final thoughts. So without further ado, let's get started. Here it is then, this is the THERON in all of its glory, and what struck me as I took it out of the box is just what a premium product this actually is. It's actually quite surprising. It retails for around about £45 in the UK, but it has the kind of premium features that you'd expect from really very expensive mice, even down to a padded bag to carry it around with, should you want to do that. Let me explain just why first impressions really count with this mouse. You have the standard features. You have a nicely braided cable. It ends in a gold-plated USB connector. It's a shaped connector, so you can actually find it fairly easily at the back of your computer. But the first thing really to hit you is the shape. I mean, it looks really aggressive. It has this kind of scooping in there. It has pretty unique set of ergonomics in terms of the way it looks side on as well. It has lots of lighting features. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But most impressively, it has really thick armour plating there, really kind of thick rubber plating all the way around. It feels great, it looks great, it feels like it's going to last forever. It probably will. Very, very nicely made indeed. The other thing that really impresses straight out of the box is the button response. It's obvious that TT eSports have really thought about the way they want this mouse to feel. It's a right-handed mouse, so you've got two thumb buttons on the left-hand side, your usual collection of buttons along the top, and one button on the right-hand side. It's very slightly ergonomic. There's a little bit of scooping on each side, but it's almost symmetrical. Unfortunately, it's not symmetrical enough for left-handers to use. However, the button response is terrific. It's clearly been designed with real-time strategy in mind. However, you can use it for any gaming genre, and I have been doing for the last 3 weeks. The button response in terms of the main ones is actually fairly loose. You can hammer away at these, and I think there would be very little danger of you getting RSI from repeated use from this mouse. Equally loose are the scroll wheel. It's nicely notched, it's precise, but it doesn't take a great deal of effort to move that backwards and forwards. Where there is slightly more resistance is actually in pressing the scroll button, like that. That's precisely as you want it. It's not too strong, it's not too weak. It's not something you're going to catch in the heat of a game and spoil your game. So just about right, I'd say. Also, the buttons on the left-hand side have slightly more resistance than the main buttons. They're probably just about perfect. Again, you're not going to hit them by accident as you're using them. There is quite a bit of resistance to the button on the right-hand side, and that's probably about right if you think about it. Your fingers roughly about there. It's the kind of button you could hit accidentally if you weren't thinking about it. You want quite a lot of resistance. It has quite a lot of resistance. Very nicely thought out button responses. Final two buttons to talk about are your DPI selectors. There are 4 DPI increments. You can set them using profiles, using the driver software. Flipping the mouse over, we'll just zoom the camera out so you can see what's here. There are some features on the reverse side of the mouse. Most of the functionality can be driven using the Windows drivers that are supplied. However, this is a mouse that's been designed to be portable, so it does have onboard memory. And so you don't need to use it with the drivers. You can change between the 5 different profiles that are supplied using the profile switches, and you can see the lighting is changing to some that I've programmed earlier as well. You can also change the polling rate of the mouse up to 1000 Hertz, I believe, is the maximum, so various different increments there. I just leave it set at 1000, to be honest. That seems the most sensible thing to do. And also you've got a slider here that disables the side buttons if you find you're catching them accidentally all the time and it's getting to annoy you. So some functionality on the reverse side of the mouse as well. If you like a heavier mouse or a lighter mouse, they have you covered. That's a panel there. It contains some removable weights. So 5 of those, add them or subtract them until the mouse exactly fits your hand. As I say, lots and lots of premium features on what is actually a very reasonably priced mouse. I've turned the room lights low and the mouse lights up just to demonstrate something else that leaves a very good first impression, and that is the lighting effects on the mouse. What you've got are a number of different lighting zones. You can set them independently to a range of colours, really to suit yourself. So here we have the mouse wheel, that's one zone. The hump of the mouse has a pulsing TT eSports logo, that's another zone that you might want to set. Another zone covers each side of the mouse, and there's one at the back of the mouse as well. And essentially use the driver software, you can play with those to your liking. Once you've got them all set up, you can save them to a profile. When you switch profiles, you get a different lighting effect. It's a very nice way, a shortcut of reminding yourself which profile you're in at any given time. So to give you a fuller idea of colours, here's one I set up earlier. It's set to a bit of a Christmas tree, slightly festive there, but if you don't like that, you could be slightly more subtle. There's a blue and red version that I set up. Here's an entirely purple version. This one is ice blue, and this one is green. It gives you a bit of flexibility as well. When you take all these features together, it's fairly clear that what you're getting is very much a premium mouse here. Very, very little to complain about in terms of the way it's set up and the features you're getting. What might split opinion slightly are the ergonomics of the mouse, and that's what we'll look at next. Right, it's time to talk shape, because as you can see, this is a pretty unusual looking mouse. And I think the best way to deal with this is by comparing this mouse to a different mouse. And the one I've chosen for comparison purposes is this one. It's the Rocket Savu, and it's sold as a mid-size gaming mouse, and it is in virtually every respect. So by comparing and contrasting, it'll give you a better idea of whether this one will suit you or not. So the first thing to do is to have a quick look at the overall size. Comparing one to the other, they're about the same length. The THERON, more or less in terms of length at least, fits the description of a mid-size gaming mouse. What you can see though is just look at the difference in widths. What you've got with the Savu is a fairly wide mouse, but really by the time you're taking the thumb scoop into account and the ergonomics on this side as well, it's actually a fairly narrow mouse, fairly in comparison with its length anyway. It's pretty nice to hold in that sense. This is different because there's not so much of a thumb scoop there, and there isn't the cutaway on this side as well. It does mean that when you're using this mouse, it feels like a wide mouse. It feels like a mouse that really fills your palm. If you like that kind of thing, this is a good mouse for you. Next thing to talk about, to compare these two mice, is the hump. If you have a look at the Savu, you can see that the hump is pretty central. It's pronounced, but it's central. About there. If you look at the THERON, the hump is towards the back, and it's a lot more pronounced than you get with the Savu. This means that this is a mouse that's really suited for people who use a palm grip. You need to slap your palm on top of it. It kind of only works that way. The reason it doesn't really work so well for fingertip grip is this is the narrowest part of the mouse, just here. Fingertip grippers, I imagine, are going to be drawn to this part of the mouse, and it can create a bit of a wobble, which makes the mouse feel a lot less accurate if you're just using your fingers to control it. The other reason for not using a fingertip grip is you see this foot here? If you like to move your mouse around like that, certainly like that, what can happen is that this skin on your thumb can get caught by that mouse. I've had that happen to me quite a few times. So really, essentially, this is a mouse that is useful for people who like to put the palm on top of it and who like a wide mouse, and also a heavy mouse, because remember, you've got those weights there if you want it. That's well and good, that's personal preference. As I say, do think twice, or think carefully at least, if you are a fingertip gripper. You might be able to get used to it. I certainly have over the course of 3 weeks or so. It's still not quite natural for me, but I'm getting there. The bit I do have a few more problems with is the button placement. If you compare these two mice, let me just try and highlight. Here are the buttons on the Savu, about halfway down, and that's quite nice because you can reach them reasonably easily with your thumb. With the THERON, they're quite far forward in comparison. Now what this means is if you have your thumb in a position that's natural for them both, i.e. there's the fleshy bit of my thumb and there's the knuckle, the rest of my hand is pretty far towards the front of the mouse. I kind of have to claw if I want to get it all on there. It does feel to me as though they could have really benefited from being a couple of centimetres back. If you like to have a fairly open hand grip like this, you can see that only the back mouse button is really accessible to you. That has caused me a few problems in games. It might not cause you any problems. So, in summary, wide mouse, palm grip mouse, with buttons fairly far forward. If you have a grip that's precisely like this, it's going to be great for you. If your grip varies from that ideal in all sorts of little ways, especially if you like to control the mouse like that, it's not so ideal. So there's some thoughts on the ergonomics. Hopefully that's enough information that you can make your own mind up as to whether this mouse will suit you. It's time to talk about drivers and gaming performance, and we'll do this by quickly looking at the driver. This is the main driver screen, and you can see that the main part of the screen is something that allows you to define your key definitions. To do this, what you do is you select the key that you're interested in, and you can see its current function just underneath the mouse here. If you want to redefine it, you essentially click on one of these buttons. You can assign a macro to it, using that dialog. You can assign a function to it. At the present moment you can see that the function it's assigned to is right button, because it's the right mouse button, makes sense. But I could also decide if I wanted I could actually turn the button off entirely, I could assign it to a double click, I could make it be backwards or forwards in a browser, sensitivity up, sensitivity down, so I could use any of those. That's a fairly limited list of options actually. I've seen other mouse drivers with far more options than that, but it's the kind of thing you don't tend to use too much anyway, so we'll let them off with that. Alternatively, you can use that button there for a quick launch of a program, and that's where I pick up an executable from that to assign. Okay, so not bad software, not especially exciting at that point. 5 profiles along the top, I can switch between them at will, and I get an on-screen overlay which tells me which one I'm using. Slightly more interesting, this is where you decide which light options you would like, and you can change them individually if you want, using this dialog. When you're done, as with any changes in this driver, hit apply and it whizzes them down to the onboard memory of the mouse, so you don't need to use the driver in the future. So that's the light options which we've covered. The performance options, 4 DPI levels here that you have: double click speed, cursor speed and scroll speed, and polling rate are essentially all set here. At the present moment I've got my up and down DPI selectors set for sensitivity up and down, as you'd expect, and you can see that I get an on-screen overlay which explains what all of those are. The one slight downer to the drivers is that you do get that overlay all the time. Whenever the driver is active and loaded, you get those overlays, and sometimes you don't want it. So for example, if you're in a game, I've been playing a lot of Dishonored with this mouse, and if I want to use my front side button, then what happens is I get that forward and backward overlay, which is quite distracting with the game. So since everything is actually loaded onto the mouse profile anyway, what I generally do is get rid of the driver from system memory and operate with just the mouse memory, and that way those overlays are a thing of the past. You don't really need them, except when you're setting up the mouse. In terms of gaming performance, well, it's actually pretty good. Obviously you've got all those DPI levels right up to 5700 DPI to play with. You set whichever ones you like, and that's combined with a fairly smooth, fairly accurate feeling laser engine, assuming you use the mouse in the way it's actually intended to be used. And that really is, just to repeat, palm on top and using it as a palm grip mouse rather than the fingertip grip mouse. I've found when using my fingertips I tend to get a slight wobble towards the rear of the mouse, which makes it feel less accurate. But if you're palm gripping, absolutely no problems. I've been using it with Dishonored for the last 3 weeks and it's been great so long as I've remembered to grip it in the correct way. On top of that, you have a reasonable amount of low friction coating along the bottom. So this is what it sounds like on a good fabric mousepad. Fairly quiet, fairly smooth to use as well. What I have found though is that I've preferred to use a dedicated laser grade mousepad. This is a SteelSeries 9 HD. Feels actually a little bit more precise on that. A little bit noisier as well, but this would be my preferred surface for this mouse. So where does that leave us? Well, in terms of overall impressions, this mouse is really quite hard to beat at its price tag. It's extremely well screwed together, it's got a decent laser engine, it has all sorts of lighting options, plenty of features, adjustable weight, braided cable, gold-plated USB, what more could you want? It's pretty good. It looks fantastic too. Against that, there are one or two causes, if not for concern, but things you should be aware of. One is that the driver software is adequate, but it's not spectacular. The other thing is that the ergonomics are very, very specific. If you like a palm grip mouse, a wide mouse, and a mouse where the buttons are actually fairly far forward in terms of the thumb buttons, you'll be great with this. If you have anything that's not quite that grip, then it would be worthwhile trying one first, because it's very, very specific in terms of the way the ergonomics work. So that's been our review of the THERON gaming mouse. Pretty good mouse all in all. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you.